Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I want to review the food philosophy, part of it anyway. I think it's a big white paper. I encourage everybody to read it, but I will touch on some of the uh, parts that are pertain to meal production and ordering and what types of foods we use. Um, and then I want to review medically tailored meals, certainly in light of what Brenda and Catherine were talking about with accreditation, hoping that I can shed some light or provide some more information about what medically tailored meals are and how we approach them at Ceres. So I'll start with the food philosophy. One of our core values and part of our mission is using food that is the healthiest for the person, the community, and the planet. And we certainly utilize this value to make a lot of our decisions. And what we order, what ingredients we use, 100% organic, sustainable, local, just being part of the menu planning process and the recipes. I see, at times we do have to make decisions around that to maintain this. A good example is tomatillos. We have a dish that we love to prepare and is really good and clients love. The name of it is escaping me, but we use tomatillos in it. And we can't get those organic or, sustainably grown or not. I mean, probably they're canned or something. But we grow them in our garden, but it's only a certain time of the year. So it's seasonal and we only offer that dish during that time. There's other examples of that as well, but that's the one that comes to my mind right now. Whole foods and minimally processed. This is kind of a loaded term, and these days, we hear it talk about a minimally processed, ultra processed, and all that. But thinking about what is a whole food, I tend to think about it, especially in the Ceres terms, as something that's the closest to its natural source, right? So, we take in produce that's from the gardens or locally produced, and then we do our process to it. Whole grains are really another great example of something that we always use whole grains. Grains that have been processed, such as like brown rice into white rice, are stripped of a lot of the some of the important nutrients. And some people will look at it and say, well, it's not that big a difference when you look at the numbers, but there's these really small trace minerals and small amounts of things that we don't need in large amounts. And when the food supply is devoid of all those, like people eat a lot of processed food and a lot of grains that are not whole, they're missing out on those important nutrients. So that can be like a public health issue. And then defining what minute processed actually means. I mean, processed can mean diced, sliced, cooked, packaged, fortified, enriched. So there's a lot of parts to being processed. And so, of course, we do minimally process our food so that people can eat it. And, I think the other really great way of looking at it is, food that is enriched or fortified, things are put back in the food that's taken out, or it's fortified to mimic something else. And you'll see like things like plant-based milks, which, by the way, are ultra processed, but, they serve a really good function in our diets, but oftentimes they add nutrients to mimic the nutrition content of milk. So we really strive to only use foods that are closest to its natural source. We use primarily plant foods, so 2/3 of the plate or so are taken up by plant foods, which of course are grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, anything that's grown in the ground. We embrace the New American Plate, which is the American Institute of Cancer Research's plate that's been researched over decades, primarily to prevent cancer or to prevent recurrence of cancer, and just overall good approach to diet. And other meal plans or approaches mimic this, like the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, things like that are all focused on plant foods. Healthy fats. So we use olive oil and sesame oil. I think those are the main ones that we typically use. We do avoid using oils and things that have been highly refined using high temperature or chemical means to extract the oils from their sources. Oils come from whole foods. They come from avocados. They come from olives. They come from nuts, seeds, things like that. One thing that I do hear a lot and get questions about is whether you should eat the oils from seeds like sunflower, safflower, those kinds of things. Besides the way that they might be processed, there's this idea that they're less healthy, which is not true. We are all, well, all need to eat essential fatty acids, which are the omega-3s and the omega-6s. But the problem with our food system is that the imbalance of those things because of processed food, there's a lot of omega-6s in our food. Omega-6 is pro-inflammatory, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. So people that eat a lot of processed food, snack foods, those kinds of things, you see a lot of corn oil and sunflower oil and all those kinds of oils in there that are typically pretty healthy for us and we need them, but the balance is off. So foods that you hear maybe that foods that are highly processed or diets that contain a lot of those is people have a lot more inflammation. And that's one of the reasons why. So we use olive oil. It's cold pressed and it's, closest to the source that it can be. We limit added sugar. We don't, typically use a lot of sugars, but the ones we use are not refined, like cane sugar. We use honey and maple syrup. I believe the only two that we tend to use, but in limited amounts. And then made with love, that's, it's not really the food part, but it's what we put into it. I think you probably all get to hear about how clients love the cards that we send that volunteers make, the flowers, things like that. And so many of our clients are isolated. They don't get out of their home sometimes because they're not, they may not have good mobility or they're sick. And they do feel very cared for and part of a community when they are part of our services. We do hear that. I know client care hears that a lot. Nutrition care hears that a lot. And I'm always amazed at how much they know about Ceres too when they're our clients. And so that's really, really important because we know that isolation and mental health are very important to prevention of disease, but also how well you manage your disease. And I think of Ceres as the antithesis of the standard American diet and, what the US food system has to offer. So, we live in a land of plenty, but a land of plenty of, things that we probably shouldn't be eating a lot of. And there's something called the bliss point. Maybe some of you have heard of that, but the food industry is very keyed into this, where we are hardwired to crave fat and salt because before we had grocery stores, thinking of cave people, they needed a drive to go out and hunt. They needed a drive to go out and gather. And salt and fat are, we have to have those things. And fat is a very concentrated form of calories. But now we live in a land of plenty. So there's a discordance for what we are driven to do and what we actually have in front of us. And the food industry knows this. So they know that we're going to crave those things and we're going to buy them and it's very profitable for them. So, Ceres, we don't provide those foods. We encourage the foods that we create, and clients, they notice the difference. I get a lot of comments around like, well, I don't normally eat beans and I don't know what these grains are. And so we're exposing them to these things. And, over time, they do get used to them and they eat them. There always are exceptions to that rule, but it is a really good exposure and education for our clients. And then we're a medically tailored meal provider. So we medically tailored meals to address medical conditions. And this is the formal definition. I'm not going to read this, but many of you have seen this before. This is a version of the FMIC definition of medically tailored meals, but essentially, we are serving people with complex medical conditions. Some of them have, issues with managing activities of daily living. They may be isolated, and they're referred to us by a health plan or by a licensed healthcare provider. And it includes a registered dietitian in the process, and they're designed, essentially to improve health outcomes, right? So they lower the cost of care and increase client satisfaction, which are things that healthcare is really interested in. And over time, these are the things that we have found that's what the impact of this model is. And the intervention really is, it's a referral from a healthcare provider or a plan. It's medically tailored meals, but also has the ongoing nutrition counseling, education, and support. And between client care and nutrition care, they have a lot of high touch moments. We contact clients as much as they need. And I think, that's what makes us unique in being in the community, and all the agencies like us. And that's one of the things that we have that the more for-profit type meal providers don't have. They're not embedded in the community. They don't know their community, and they're not as connected to their clients. And I'm just going to briefly do how it began, because this is not something new. This has been around for decades and started, I know many of you have seen this too, but with the HIV epidemic, where a grassroots efforts was created to feed people that were literally wasting, right? So they saw that had a huge impact on their survival as well as their quality of life. And by the 90s, there was funding for this, a lot of really great funding from the federal government under Water and White Care Act. And the unique thing about this funding that I was able to experience was they had a lot of different services. It's very wraparound. So they could get their medications, they could go to their healthcare provider, and food. And it was also required that a dietitian was part of the process to make sure that they were, tailored to the needs of people living with HIV and AIDS. And then thankfully over time, thanks to medications, we started seeing people surviving much longer. And then they had things like diabetes and heart disease. And so we had to really pivot and create menu plans and meal plans that weren't just about calories, but really what type of calories. We had to make sure that they were the right amount of carbohydrates and there was the right type of fat. So that really was the change. And then there's a lot of research over this time to show the impact. And so that's kind of where we are today, with the difference being that not just the doctors or healthcare providers are referring, but health plans are too. So this, it's amazing the trajectory that we've had. So it's been around for a while, and keeps on growing. So what is a medically tailored meal at Ceres? In addition to our food philosophy principles, which is an excellent base for all of this, we have right now, these are our meal plan types. I'm going to go into this a little bit more in detail, so I won't go deep into this, but we have our standard meal plan. We have our plain and simple. We will be starting our chronic kidney disease meal plan in September. Yay, team. And then we also address other restrictions, major allergens. We're really amazing at this. One of the things that I was just blown away with when I first started at Ceres, and we also accommodate vegetarian and vegan meal plans for our folks that prefer that. Oops. These are our meal standards, and it looks like a lot of information, which it is, but these are our targets. This is what we create our meals to. This is what I look at. I created these from the FIMIC standards. And this is how I work with Skylar and Cheyenne to make sure we meet these particular numbers that we have here that are all evidence-based practice guidelines. And also the different conditions in which these diets can address on the far right. So you can see, we can really accommodate a lot of folks with the standard diet, which most of our clients are actually on. And then we have plain and simple, and then we will have CKD as well. So what I really wanted to try to do is to kind of show how diet is related to chronic health conditions and what we do on our part with our meals to address them. A lot of our clients, I think it's like 40%, if I remember correctly, have diabetes, right? So this is a very simplistic view of it. This is a lot more complicated than it is on here, but essentially people with diabetes are dealing with sugars that usually are not within the right range. And the goal is, of course, to control that blood sugar. And diet is a key part of that approach. A lot of other things affect blood sugar, but what we do is provide meals. And what we have to do is control the amount of carbohydrate in the meal. We have a predictable amount of carbohydrate in the meal. We provide plenty of dietary fiber with all our plant-based foods, and it has to be heart healthy, being that people with diabetes are at much higher risk for heart disease. And then, of course, a lot of our clients do have coronary artery disease, which, very simply put, is when arteries start to get narrow and clog, they harden, and the blood flow is reduced to their organs and hearts, and can cause stroke, heart attacks, and eventually can lead to congestive heart failure when the heart it becomes weaker. And it's very important for them to control blood pressure and to manage high cholesterol. And sometimes weight control is a big part of how we manage it. So in our diet with our standard meal plan, we control the amount of fat. It's mostly saturated fat. We don't use trans fats. We provide plenty of fiber because, again, fiber is an intervention that works really well for both blood sugar and blood cholesterol. And we control the amount of sodium, which is probably one of the number one thing that is the most important thing that we do is control sodium in our meals. It's very difficult for people to get used to sometimes. A lot of clients are like, well, it's not so bland, but you can get used to it, and clients do eventually get used to it. And then my favorite is the kidney disease. Probably my favorite organ is the kidney. I could talk about it for hours. But it has so many functions, but one of the major functions of the kidneys is it filters our blood. So during metabolism and all the functions of our body, we have a lot of waste products, right? So that we have to process them and get rid of them, and that's what the kidney does. Helps control fluid balance. What happens is these waste products build up, they get a buildup of fluid, and then electrolyte imbalances. And there's, our bodies are amazing at keeping things in check, but when something isn't working right, things can go very wrong. And especially potassium, if your potassium is too high, your heart can stop. So it's important for clients to understand these components of, their restrictions, and important for us to be able to provide this. The other thing that, for about 40% of people with kidney disease have diabetes. So they're all very interrelated. A lot of our clients have diabetes, heart disease, and kidney disease. So that's one of the reasons that we are pushing to do this particular meal plan, because so many of our clients come in with this. And what our meals do is we lower the protein in these meals to reduce the strain on the kidneys and reduce, waste product of the metabolism of protein. We even have it further reduced in sodium, very important. Reduce the intake of phosphorus to prevent bone disease. And then it's plant-based because that's what we do. And luckily, research shows that plant-based protein is probably better for people with kidney failure or kidney disease as opposed to animal sources. And our overall goal is to prevent further damage or improve their function of their kidneys. And then cancer and treatment, a lot of our clients that—
Hey, Kim, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
One of the reasons why chronic kidney disease we're looking at it is because there's a pretty good body of research showing that we can prevent people moving to end-stage renal disease and having to go on dialysis, which obviously totally impacts their quality of life, but it also is really expensive. So this is a win-win, and many of the FIMIC agencies have big portions of their client bases that are kidney disease. And we haven't been able to because we didn't have the right menu plan. So this has been a priority for us, and really want to thank Kim and Skylar for moving this one forward.
Yeah, very good point. And the other piece is so many people don't know they have it. Probably 50% of the clients I talk to, like, I don't have kidney disease. I'm like, well, yeah, you do, but and they don't see a dietitian. It's a staggering amount of people by the time they get to dialysis have never even talked to a dietitian. So that is one big part of what we can do too, is we are able to intervene in that way as well, and provide some education. So yeah, very good point. And then, yeah, cancer and treatment, the biggest risk for people that are in treatment is malnutrition. And a lot of the research shows that, maintaining a good nutritional status means treatment's going to work better and survival is going to be better. So that is really the large focus. And our meals are plant-based, and, started because we were started just serving people with cancer right from the very beginning. And so this is in line with recommendations. And then we also are able to provide palatable foods for people that are having side effects. So that would be our plain and simple diet. And this is why, this is, on all that, we know all that and what we do, but, the actual production and packaging of the meals is so important. And And that's why we utilize the evidence-based nutrition standards, and we have our own set standards for our meals that we need to adhere to. We use and follow recipes. We have to know that what's in that recipe is in the right amounts and we're all doing the same thing. And we do a nutrient analysis of all recipes and meals, right? So that's what I do. And I work with Skylar and Cheyenne a lot to try to make sure things can, we have to change things sometimes. And I do provide this information to clients, especially people that are managing diabetes with insulin. They need to know how much carbohydrate they're going to be consuming so they know how much insulin to provide to give themselves. So this is super important. We have a lot of type 1s. We have a lot of type 2s that are dependent on insulin. And I send this to them. Yahira and I send this information. So we are sticking to our recipes, and then of course portioning correctly. So if we're portioning out some brown rice, we want to make sure that it is the half a cup that we say that we're providing, not just sort of like, oh, let's give them a little extra because we want to feed people, which of course we do, but then that changes the content of the meals, and that can be provide some kind of error for some people in providing their medication. So it's important that all those things happen. And that is what medically tailored meals really are about, is making sure that we are providing and doing no harm.